Lyra had learned to make herself invisible over 8 years of slavery, had perfected the art of moving through the silver mines without drawing attention. She kept her white blonde hair hidden beneath a gray scarf, kept her pale skin covered despite the suffocating heat, kept her gray-blue eyes fixed on the ground so no one would see the spark of defiance she hadn't quite managed to extinguish. Slaves who drew attention didn't last long in the Blackwood Pack. Tonight, she was on inspection duty in the deep mines, a task given only to the most trusted slaves because it meant being alone where escape might be possible. Lyra had learned years ago that escape was a fantasy. Every pack within 200 miles had agreements to return runaways. The forest was full of rogues. And even if she made it to neutral territory, what then? She had no pack, no family, no resources. She was marked as property, literally with the brand on her left shoulder that burned every time she shifted. She'd been 15 when the Blackwood Wolves massacred her entire pack over a river border disagreement. She tried not to think about that day, about her parents who died fighting, about her little brother Noah, only 7, who'd survived the massacre only to die 4 months later from lung sickness in the mines. The sound hit her as she passed the sealed section. Tunnels closed off 2 years ago after a collapse. It was faint at first, almost lost in the constant drip of water. But Lyra had learned to hear things others missed. It was a whimper, pained and desperate, coming from behind the sealed passage. Lyra stopped, heart pounding. Nothing should be back there. The sealed section was unstable and dangerous, marked with warnings even guards respected. But that sound came again, weaker, and Lyra's hands tightened on her lantern. She should keep walking, finish her inspection, pretend she'd heard nothing. But something in that whimper called to her wolf, the part of her that 8 years of slavery hadn't completely broken, the part that still remembered what it meant to be pack, to help those suffering. The barricade was old and poorly maintained. Lyra pulled the rotted boards aside with minimal effort. Guards were lazy about checking the deep mines. Confident slaves were too afraid to explore forbidden areas. If she was going to die in these mines, she'd rather die doing something that mattered than waste away from silver poisoning and despair. The tunnel was in worse shape than expected, walls showing cracks, ceiling sagging. She moved carefully, testing each step, following the sound deeper into the abandoned section. She found him in what had once been an interrogation chamber, a room guards used for particularly stubborn slaves. Small, windowless, with iron rings in the walls and dark stains on the floor. And in the center, covered in silver chains so thick they looked like they weighed more than she did, was the largest white wolf she'd ever seen. Lyra froze, lantern light falling across a scene that made her stomach twist. The wolf was massive, easily 4 feet tall at the shoulder even lying down, with thick, white fur matted with blood and burned black where silver touched skin. The chains wrapped around his entire body. So many layers she couldn't see how he was still breathing. Silver smoke rose from every point of contact, the metal actively burning through fur and flesh. The smell made her eyes water, but it was the runes carved into the chains that made her blood run cold. She recognized the symbols from her grandmother's stories. Binding runes meant to prevent shifting and drain energy. Dark magic outlawed by the Council of Alphas for being too cruel even for prisoners of war. Someone hadn't just chained this wolf with silver. They'd ensured he couldn't escape, couldn't shift to heal, couldn't do anything but suffer and die slowly in this forgotten room. The wolf's eyes cracked open, ice-blue irises glowing in the dimness. He looked at her with such pain and desperation that Lyra felt her heart crack. She should leave, run back to her area and forget she'd ever found him. This was clearly a prisoner, someone important enough to warrant this level of torture. Helping him would earn her an execution so brutal, it would make 8 years of slavery look merciful. but looking into those ice-blue eyes, seeing the intelligence and pain and desperate hope, Lyra found she didn't care anymore. "I'm going to help you," she whispered, setting down her lantern and approaching slowly. "I don't know if you understand me, but I'm getting these chains off. Just hold on." The wolf made a sound between a whimper and a whine, eyes never leaving her face. Up close, he was even more magnificent. This was a shifter, she was sure of it. Trapped in animal form by binding runes, too weak to shift back even if the magic allowed it. A shifter with fur this white and pure, with a build this massive, had to be from one of the great packs. Lyra reached for the first chain and felt the familiar tingle in her palms that she'd learned to hide since childhood. Silver didn't burn her the way it burned other wolves. Her grandmother had called it a blessing from the moon goddess. Stories about the silver blessed who appeared once in a generation with the ability to handle the metal that was poison to their kind. Her parents had made her promise never to tell anyone, knowing such a rare gift would make her a target. The Blackwood pack didn't know about her resistance. She'd hidden it carefully. If they'd known, they would have worked her even harder, probably until the constant exposure killed her anyway. But right now, her secret was the only thing that could save this wolf's life. She ran back to the main tunnel and grabbed bolt cutters, a hacksaw, and a pry bar. The tools were heavy, not meant for someone her size, but desperation gave her strength. She worked for 40 minutes, hands cramping and bleeding, sweat dripping into her eyes as she cut and pried and broke chain after chain. The wolf stayed perfectly still, only his labored breathing indicating consciousness. Lyra talked to him while she worked, constant reassurance and encouragement, telling him to hold on, promising freedom, begging him not to give up. The binding runes made it harder. Every chain she removed seemed replaced by magic, pulling tighter on the remaining ones. But Lyra was stubborn, had learned persistence from 8 years of surviving what should have killed her. When the last chain finally fell away with a metallic clatter, the wolf took his first full breath in days. His whole body shuddered with the inhale, chest expanding properly. His eyes opened wider, and he looked at her with something that made Lyra's breath catch. Recognition, gratitude, and something deeper. "You need to go," she said urgently, backing toward the door. "Get up, run. Get as far from here as you can before they realize you're gone." The wolf struggled to his feet, legs shaking badly, burned skin still smoking. He was weak, probably too weak to make it far. She turned to leave and froze when she heard his voice, rough and deep and absolutely human despite coming from a wolf's throat. "Wait." Lyra spun back to find the wolf was no longer a wolf. In his place stood a man, naked and covered in silver burns and dried blood, tall enough to duck slightly to avoid hitting his head. His hair was platinum blonde, hanging to his shoulders in tangled waves. His face was all sharp angles and strong bones. His body was pure muscle, though clearly malnourished. But it was his eyes that made Lyra's heart stop. Ice blue, pale, striking. And she recognized those eyes. Had seen them in drawings, heard them described in terrified whispers of guards. She'd just freed Ronan, the Alpha King of the Frost Peak Pack, the most powerful alpha in 500 miles. The wolf who'd been at war with Blackwood for 2 years over territorial disputes and Blackwood's refusal to stop slave trading. The king who'd come to negotiate peace 4 days ago and hadn't been seen since. She'd just cut him loose. Ronan took a shaking step toward her, hand reaching out like he wanted to touch her, but was giving her the choice to move away. "You freed me," he said, voice raspy from days of screaming. "You touched Silver to save me. You risked your life for a stranger." Lyra backed up until her shoulders hit the wall. "You need to go, right now. Guards check the deep mines every 2 hours. If they find you here, if they know I helped you, they'll kill everyone in the slave quarters. Every Omega, every child. You need to leave before anyone realizes you're gone." Ronan shook his head slowly, ice blue eyes never leaving her face. I'm not leaving without you. You're mine now. By law of the moon goddess and right of life debt, you belong to me. Where I go, you go. The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. She'd spent 8 years as property. 8 years being owned and controlled and treated like an object instead of a person. She'd dreamed of freedom, of being able to make her own choices, of belonging to no one but herself. And this man, this king she'd just saved, was claiming ownership like she was a prize he'd won. I don't belong to anyone, she said, voice shaking with anger and fear. I'm not your property. I saved your life because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted a new master. Something flickered in Ronan's eyes, an emotion she couldn't quite read. I didn't mean it like that, he started, then swayed on his feet, legs finally giving out. Lyra moved without thinking, catching him before he could hit the ground, arms wrapping around his waist as she tried to support his much larger weight. He was burning up with fever, skin hot where it wasn't covered in silver burns. You're going to die if you don't get help, she said, adjusting her grip. Can you walk? Can you make it to the surface? Ronan's arm came around her shoulders, using her as a crutch. I can walk, but I'm not leaving you here. If the guards realize what you've done, they'll kill you. You're coming with me. I can't, Lyra said desperately, already helping him toward the door despite her words. The other slaves, they'll punish everyone. I have friends here, people I care about. I can't just abandon them. Then we'll come back for them, Ronan said, weight heavy against her side. After I've recovered, after I've gathered my warriors, we'll free every slave in these mines and burn Blackwood territory to the ground. But first, I need to get you somewhere safe. They stumbled through the tunnels together, Lyra supporting as much of Ronan's weight as she could manage. Behind them she could hear distant sounds, guards beginning their rounds. The night air hit them when they emerged, cold and clean after the stifling heat. Ronan breathed deeply, eyes closing for a moment. My territory is 2 days north, Ronan said quietly, hand tightening on Lyra's shoulder. If we can make it to the border, my wolves will scent me and come. We just need to survive that long. Lyra thought about the slave quarters, about the 15 other Omegas who'd become her family, about old Helena, who'd taught her to read, about young Finn, only 11, who still believed he might see his parents again, about River and Ash, the bonded pair who'd survived by protecting each other. If she left with Ronan, if the guards discovered what she'd done, those wolves would suffer. But looking at Ronan, seeing the determination in his eyes despite his weakness, she realized she couldn't let him die either. He was important, not just to himself, but to thousands of wolves in his territory. His death would mean war, more destruction and suffering. And maybe, just maybe, if she helped him get home, he'd keep his promise to come back for the others. 10 minutes, she said firmly. Give me 10 minutes to warn my friends, to tell them to run. Please. Ronan studied her face, then nodded slowly. 10 minutes. But if anyone tries to stop you, if anyone threatens you, you scream and I'll kill them. Lyra didn't waste time arguing. She ran to the slave quarters and slipped inside. Most were asleep, exhausted from 16-hour shifts, but Helena was awake, watching the stars like she always did. Helena, Lyra whispered urgently, shaking the old woman's shoulder. Listen carefully. I freed the Frost Peak King from the deep mines. He's alive, and I'm helping him escape. When guards realize he's gone, they're going to punish everyone here. You need to wake everyone and run. Right now. Helena's eyes went wide, wrinkled hand gripping Lyra's wrist. Child, what have you done? What I had to, Lyra said, already moving to wake others. He's going to come back. He's going to bring his army and free everyone. But you need to survive until then. So run. Please. She woke as many as she could, whispering urgent warnings. Some believed her immediately. Others thought she'd gone mad. A few were too sick or old to move, resigned to whatever fate had in store. But Lyra did what she could, gave them the choice, then returned to Ronan before her 10 minutes were up. Did they listen? Some of them, Lyra admitted. The ones who could run will run. I did what I could. Ronan's arm came around her shoulders again, heavier this time. Then let's go. They walked into the forest, leaving behind the only home Lyra had known for 8 years. Ronan's weight grew heavier with each step, his breathing more labored, his skin burning hotter with fever. The silver poisoning was getting worse. By the time sun started to rise, Ronan could barely walk. Lyra had been practically carrying him for the last hour, her own strength running out. They'd made it maybe 4 miles from the Blackwood compound, not nearly far enough to be safe. We need to stop, Lyra said, voice strained. You need rest. You need food and water and treatment. Ronan shook his head stubbornly. Can't stop. Not safe. They'll have hunting parties out. We keep moving, or we die. But his legs gave out before he could take another step, and they both went down on the forest floor. Ronan tried to get up, arms shaking, but couldn't manage it. The silver poisoning had progressed too far. Lyra knelt beside him, hands hovering over his burned skin, desperate to help, but not knowing how. She'd learned basic healing in the mines, but this was beyond her skill. Ronan needed a real healer. Listen to me, Ronan said, voice barely above a whisper, ice-blue eyes finding hers. In my left boot. Emergency healing potion. Take it out. Lyra fumbled with his boot, finding a small glass vial in a hidden pocket. The liquid inside glowed faintly blue, smelling sharp and medicinal. What is it? Concentrated wolfsbane mixed with silver extract, Ronan said, managing a weak smile. I know. Sounds like poison. But for silver poisoning, you fight fire with fire. The wolfsbane neutralizes the silver in my bloodstream. It'll hurt like hell, but it'll keep me alive long enough to reach my territory. Lyra helped him sit up enough to drink. The effect was immediate and violent. Ronan's body convulsed, back arching as he screamed through gritted teeth. Lyra held him while he thrashed, smelling the silver being purged from his system, seeing the burns starting to close. After what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, Ronan went limp in her arms, breathing evening out, fever breaking. Still weak, still injured, but no longer dying. Rest, Lyra said softly, brushing platinum hair from his face. Just for a little while. I'll keep watch. Ronan's hand caught hers, grip surprisingly strong. You saved my life twice now. Once in the mines, and once just now. I owe you everything. You don't owe me anything, Lyra said, trying to pull away, but he held firm. I did what anyone would do. No, Ronan said, eyes intense despite exhaustion. You did what most people wouldn't. You risked everything to free a stranger. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the most foolish. And right now, I'm too grateful to care which. They rested for 2 hours while the sun climbed higher. When Ronan woke, he looked better. Burns still visible but healing. Strength returning slowly. They moved faster than before, covering ground at a pace that would have been impossible with Ronan in his previous condition. Tell me about yourself, Ronan said as they walked, eyes constantly scanning for threats. How did you end up in the Blackwood mines? Lyra hesitated, not wanting to share her story, but his tone was genuinely curious rather than demanding. My pack was destroyed 8 years ago. Blackwood wanted control of the river through our territory. We refused. They massacred everyone, took the survivors as slaves. What was your pack called? Riverbend, Lyra said quietly, the name painful to speak. We were small, only about 50 wolves, mostly fishers and traders. We didn't stand a chance. Ronan's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his ice-blue eyes. I remember hearing about that. The council condemned it, but did nothing. I was still learning to lead then. Not yet king. Or I would have intervened. Would you? Lyra asked with genuine curiosity. Would you really have gone to war over a pack you didn't know? Yes, Ronan said simply. Because allowing one pack to massacre another without consequences sets a precedent. I've spent the last 2 years trying to force Blackwood to stop their slave trade. Coming to their territory under a white flag was a mistake, clearly, but I had to try before I brought my full army down on them. They walked in silence for a while. Lyra found herself studying Ronan when she thought he wasn't looking. He moved with grace that spoke of years of warrior training. He was handsome in a way that was almost intimidating, too perfect to seem entirely real. And he was the Alpha King, ruler of one of the greatest packs in the region, and he'd claimed her as his. What did you mean? She asked suddenly. When you said I belonged to you, what did that mean? Ronan stopped walking, turning to face her fully. I phrased that poorly. I was weak and not thinking clearly. What I meant was that you saved my life, which creates a life debt under Moon Goddess law. And more than that, my wolf recognized you the moment you entered that room. Recognized you as mine, as my mate. I know you don't feel the bond yet. Probably won't until we complete it. But I felt it immediately. You're my true mate, Lyra. The one the Moon Goddess chose for me. Lyra stared at him, mind struggling to process. True mates were rare, the stuff of legends. The idea that she, a former slave with nothing, could be the destined mate of an Alpha King was absurd. That's not possible, she said, shaking her head. True mates are 1 in a million. The chances of everything lining up perfectly like that, it's not possible. The Moon Goddess works in mysterious ways, Ronan said with a slight smile. Maybe it was fate, maybe divine intervention, maybe incredibly lucky coincidence, but it doesn't change what I felt. You're mine, Lyra, and I'm yours. That's not ownership, that's partnership. 2 halves of one soul finally finding each other. Before Lyra could argue, Ronan tensed, nostrils flaring. We need to move. Now. There are wolves coming. At least 8. Blackwood hunting party. They ran, Ronan's hand tight around Lyra's wrist, pulling her through the forest at a pace she couldn't maintain alone. Behind them, she could hear crashing, could hear howls. I can't outrun them, Lyra gasped, lungs burning. Ronan, I'm not a warrior. I'm just an Omega. You need to leave me and save yourself. Not happening, Ronan growled, pulling her behind a massive oak and pinning her against the trunk. Listen carefully. When they get here, I'm shifting and fighting them off. You're going to run north as fast as you can. Don't stop. Don't look back. When you cross into Frostpeak territory, my wolves will find you. Tell them you're with me, that I sent you. They'll protect you. You can't fight 8 wolves alone, Lyra said desperately. You're still weak. They'll kill you. Ronan smiled, and it was terrible. All teeth and promise of violence. I'm the Alpha King, little Omega. I've fought worse odds and won. But I need to know you're safe before I can focus. Promise me you'll run. Lyra wanted to refuse, to stay and fight beside him even though she had no combat training. But looking into his ice-blue eyes, seeing the determination there, she found herself nodding. I promise, but you better survive this, Ronan. I didn't cut all those chains just so you could die in the forest. He kissed her then, hard and quick and claiming, his lips crushing against hers in a kiss that stole what little breath she had left. When he pulled back, his eyes were glowing with his wolf's presence. Run, Lyra, and don't stop until you're home. Then he was shifting, body expanding and changing, bones restructuring and fur sprouting, until where Ronan had stood now crouched a massive white wolf with ice-blue eyes. Easily twice the size of a normal wolf, pure muscle and barely contained rage. He turned toward the approaching hunting party and howled, a sound of challenge and fury that echoed through the forest. Lyra ran. She ran like she'd never run before, legs pumping, heart racing, branches whipping her face. Behind her, she heard the sounds of battle, snarls and yelps and snapping bones. She wanted to look back, to see if Ronan was winning, but she'd promised him she wouldn't stop. She ran until her legs gave out, until she collapsed at the base of a tree, with lungs burning and vision spotty. She didn't know how long she'd been running, didn't know how far, didn't know if she'd crossed into Frost Peak territory yet. All she knew was that she couldn't hear fighting anymore. Then she heard the growl, low and threatening, coming from her left. Lyra's head snapped up to find herself surrounded by 5 massive wolves, all with fur ranging from gray to brown to black. All watching her with suspicious eyes. She scrambled to her feet, backing against the tree. "Please," she gasped. "Please, I'm with Ronan, the Alpha King. He sent me. He told me to run to Frost Peak territory and find his wolves. Please, I'm not a threat." The largest wolf, a massive gray beast with amber eyes, shifted in a fluid motion. The man who appeared was tall and broad-shouldered, with gray streaked hair and a scar down his left cheek. "You're the slave girl," he said, voice gruff but not unkind. "The one who freed our king. We've been tracking his scent. Where is he?" "He stayed to fight off the hunting party," Lyra said, pointing back with a shaking hand. "8 Blackwood wolves. He made me promise to run. Please, you have to help him. He's still weak from silver poisoning." The gray-haired man's expression hardened, and he barked orders. 3 wolves immediately raced off. The remaining wolf, a smaller, brown-furred female, shifted to human form. She was beautiful, in a fierce way, with short brown hair and golden eyes. "I'm Kira, one of Ronan's elite guard. You're safe now. You're in Frost Peak territory." Lyra's legs gave out completely, and she slid down the tree. "Is he going to be okay? Will he survive?" "If anyone can survive 8 against 1, it's our king," Kira said, crouching to Lyra's level. "He's the strongest alpha born in 3 generations. But I won't lie. If he's as weak as you say, this fight will be hard." They waited in tense silence. Minutes crawled like hours. When the 3 wolves finally returned, Ronan was with them in human form, supported between 2 guards. He was covered in blood, new wounds mixing with healing, silver burns, but he was alive. His ice-blue eyes found Lyra immediately, and he smiled. "Told you I'd survive, though I'll admit, 8 on 1 while recovering from silver poisoning is not an experience I want to repeat." Lyra ran to him, not caring about the blood or the naked guards. She crashed into him hard enough that the guards supporting him grunted, her arms wrapped around his waist, face pressing against his chest. "You're an idiot," she said, voice muffled. A complete and total idiot who could have died. Ronan's arms came around her, holding her close despite obvious exhaustion. "But I didn't die, because I had you to fight for. Had to make sure you were safe before I could let myself collapse." The gray-haired man cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should continue this reunion somewhere more secure, like back at the palace, where our king can get proper medical attention." The journey to Frost Peak's main settlement took another full day. Ronan insisted on walking under his own power despite his guards' protests, though Lyra noticed he leaned on her more than he probably wanted to admit. Frost Peak territory was beautiful, towering pines and ancient oaks, giving way to meadows full of wildflowers. Clear streams cut through the landscape, and in the center stood the palace, a massive structure built from gray stone and dark wood. Wolves in both forms stopped to stare as Ronan's party entered the main courtyard. Lyra heard gasps and whispers, saw shock and relief and joy. A woman with silver blonde hair and tears streaming down her face ran forward and threw herself at Ronan, sobbing about how worried she'd been. "I'm fine, Sage," Ronan said gently, patting the woman's back. "Shaken and burned, but alive thanks to this woman here. Everyone, this is Lyra. She's the reason I'm standing here instead of dead in the Blackwood mines. She's to be treated with respect and honor." The crowd's attention shifted to Lyra, hundreds of eyes examining her with curiosity and calculation. She wanted to hide, to make herself invisible, like in the mines. But Ronan's hand was warm on the small of her back, steady and reassuring. An elderly man with white hair stepped forward, bowing slightly. "I am Elder Marcus, head of the council. On behalf of Frostpeak, I thank you for returning our king. You'll be given a place of honor here for as long as you wish to stay." "She's not a guest," Ronan said firmly, hand tightening slightly on Lyra's back. "She's my true mate, and your future Luna. She'll be given quarters in the royal wing and treated as such." The declaration caused an uproar. Wolves started talking over each other, some excited, some skeptical, some clearly disapproving. Lyra felt her face flush with embarrassment and anger. Ronan had done it again. Claimed her publicly without asking what she wanted. "We need to talk," she said quietly, just loud enough for Ronan to hear. "Privately, right now." Ronan led Lyra through the palace's corridors to a suite of rooms, clearly his personal quarters. The moment the door closed, Lyra rounded on him. "You can't keep doing that. You can't keep announcing to everyone that I'm yours without asking me first. I spent 8 years as property. 8 years being owned and controlled. I won't trade one master for another, no matter how pretty the chains are." Ronan had the grace to look ashamed, sinking into a chair and wincing. "You're right. I keep saying things the wrong way, keep trying to protect you by claiming you publicly, when what I'm actually doing is taking away your choices. I'm sorry." The apology took the wind out of Lyra's sails. She'd expected him to argue, to insist he knew best. "I don't want to be claimed," she said, voice softer. "I don't want to be anyone's mate, or Luna, or queen. I just want to be free to make my own choices for the first time in 8 years." Ronan nodded slowly. "Then be free. I'll give you quarters in the guest wing instead of the royal rooms. You can come and go as you please. No restrictions. And I'll court you properly, like I should have done. Let you get to know me. Let you decide if you actually want me, instead of just accepting, because I declared you were mine." "And if I decide I don't want you?" Lyra asked, needing to know. "Then I'll accept your decision and find you whatever future you want," Ronan said, meeting her eyes steadily. "Whether that's a place in this pack as a healer or warrior, or safe passage to another pack, or resources to start your own life. I won't force you to be with me, Lyra. Your happiness matters more than some cosmic prophecy." Lyra studied him, looking for deception or manipulation, but all she saw was exhaustion and sincerity and hope. "I'll stay," she said finally. "For now. I'll stay and see what happens. But no more public claims. No more announcing my status without permission. If we're going to try this, we try it as equals." Ronan's smile was brilliant. "Equals. I can work with that." The next few months were an adjustment. True to his word, Ronan gave her quarters in the guest wing and didn't push for anything more than conversation and occasional shared meals. The pack's reaction was mixed. Some were grateful she'd saved their king. Others were suspicious of an outsider being elevated without earning it. A few were openly hostile, particularly unmated females who'd had hopes of becoming Luna. Lyra kept her head down and spent most of her time in the healing lodge, where her basic medical knowledge made her useful. It was there that she met Willow, the pack's head healer. Willow was tiny with wild curly hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She was examining Lyra's hands one afternoon, noting the calluses and scars, when she paused over Lyra's palms. "These marks," Willow said slowly, tracing faint silver lines. "These are from silver contact, but they're old scars, not fresh burns. You've handled silver extensively. You're silver blessed." Lyra's heart raced as she tried to pull away, but Willow held firm. "I don't know what you're—" "Yes, you do," Willow said gently. "You can touch the metal without it burning you immediately. It's incredibly rare. Maybe 1 in 10,000 wolves, and you've been hiding it." There was no point denying it. Lyra slumped in her chair, defeated. My grandmother told me to never tell anyone. Said people would use me if they knew. Your grandmother was wise, Willow said, finally releasing Lyra's hands. Silver-blessed wolves have been exploited throughout history. But you're not in the mines anymore. You're in a pack that values its healers. A silver-blessed healer is beyond precious. You could purify silver poisoning by drawing out toxin with your bare hands. You could handle silver-based medications too dangerous for other healers. You could save lives that would otherwise be lost. And Ronan, Lyra asked quietly. What happens when he finds out I kept this from him? You tell him yourself, Willow advised, before someone else does. Trust is the foundation of any relationship. He needs to know who you really are. Lyra told Ronan that night over dinner in his private dining room. She explained about her grandmother's warnings, her fears of being exploited. When she finished, Ronan just listened quietly. That's how you freed me, he said slowly, understanding dawning. The silver chains. You cut through them without gloves. You should have been burned raw, but you weren't because you can't be burned by silver. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, Lyra said, hands twisting in her lap. I was afraid you'd see me as a tool instead of a person. Ronan reached across the table and took her hands. I value you, Lyra. The woman who risked everything to free a stranger. The person who warned her friends before running. The healer who spends her days helping sick wolves, even though she doesn't have to. Your gift is remarkable, yes, but it's not why I want you. I want you because you're brave and compassionate and stubborn and perfect, exactly as you are. Something in Lyra's chest loosened, a knot she'd been carrying for weeks, finally releasing. Thank you, she said softly, for not making me regret telling you. Over the next months, Lyra fell into a rhythm that felt almost like belonging. She worked in the healing lodge with Willow. She made friends with other Omegas, including Kira from Ronan's elite guard. She explored the territory, and she spent time with Ronan. He courted her like he'd promised, with patience and care and genuine interest. They had dinner together several times a week. He took her on walks through the forest. He made her laugh with stories about his guard's antics and listened seriously when she talked about her trauma. She found herself falling for him despite her best efforts not to. Falling for the way he treated everyone with respect. Falling for how he'd spend hours playing with pups. Falling for the way he looked at her like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. But she was still scared. Scared of trusting too much, of giving someone power over her again, of losing the freedom she'd only just begun to taste. It was Elder Marcus who finally gave her perspective. They'd been working together in the healing lodge, preparing medications, when the old wolf set down his mortar and pestle. You're afraid of the bond, he said. Not a question. Afraid of losing yourself. Lyra didn't bother denying it. I spent 8 years as property. The thought of being bound to someone, of having my soul tied to theirs, it feels like slavery with extra steps. Marcus smiled kindly. That's because you're thinking of it wrong. The mate bond doesn't take away yourself. It doesn't make you property or remove your agency. It simply means you and your mate are stronger together than apart. You still make your own choices, still have your own thoughts and feelings. You're just never alone with them. You have a partner who feels what you feel, who supports you when you're weak and celebrates when you're strong. It's not slavery. It's the opposite. It's having someone who will fight for your freedom as fiercely as they fight for their own. And if Ronan tries to control me using the bond, then he wouldn't be worthy of you, and the bond would wither, Marcus said simply. True mate bonds only thrive when both partners respect each other's autonomy. Force or control breaks the connection rather than strengthening it. Ronan knows this. He's been trained since childhood in how to be a good mate. And if he ever forgets, I give you permission to remind him loudly and with as much violence as necessary. Lyra laughed despite herself, but Marcus's words stayed with her, rolling around in her mind. The mate bond didn't have to be a chain. It could be a connection, a partnership, a choice to share strength rather than surrender it. 3 months after arriving at Frost Peak, Lyra made her decision. She found Ronan in his office, buried in paperwork. He looked up when she entered, a smile immediately lighting his face. "Hey," he said, setting aside his work. "Is everything okay?" "I want to complete the bond," Lyra said, the words coming out in a rush. "I want to be your mate. Your real mate, not just the woman you're courting. I want the connection, the partnership, all of it." Ronan was around the desk and pulling her into his arms before she'd finished speaking. "Are you sure? We can wait longer." "I'm sure," Lyra said, arms wrapping around his waist. "I'm sure because you've spent 3 months proving you see me as a person, not property. Because you've given me space when I needed it, and support when I asked. Because every day you choose to respect my autonomy, even when it would be easier to command obedience. I trust you, Ronan. I trust us. So yes, I'm ready." The mating ceremony was held under the full moon 2 days later, the entire Frost Peak pack in attendance. Lyra wore a dress of white silk that Willow had made, simple and elegant, nothing like the rags from the mines. Ronan wore formal robes in the pack's colors of silver and blue. When they exchanged vows before the pack and the moon goddess, promising to honor and protect each other, to be partners in all things, to choose each other every day, Lyra felt something inside her shift and settle. Like a piece that had always been missing, finally clicked into place. Ronan marked her first, his teeth sinking into the junction of her neck and shoulder in a claiming bite that sent pleasure racing through her entire body. The mate bond snapped into place like a rubber band stretched too tight, suddenly released. She could feel Ronan in her mind, could sense his love and devotion and overwhelming relief that she'd chosen him, could feel that he saw her as an equal, a partner, someone to be cherished rather than controlled. Then it was her turn to mark him, her much smaller teeth finding the same spot on his neck. Ronan's hands tightened on her waist, and she felt his pleasure through the bond. When she pulled back, their eyes met, and she saw her own wonder reflected in his ice-blue gaze. They were bonded. Truly, completely bonded. 2 souls tied together by choice and moon goddess blessing. The pack howled their approval, a song of joy and celebration, and new beginnings that Lyra felt in her very bones. She was no longer a slave, no longer property, no longer alone. She was Luna of the Frost Peak pack, mate to an Alpha King who loved her. Finally free. But the celebration was interrupted by a commotion at the clearing's edge. Guards were escorting someone forward, someone fighting and cursing and demanding to see the king. Lyra's blood ran cold when she recognized Helena, her friend from the mines, along with Finn and River and Ash and a dozen other former slaves. "They showed up at the border claiming asylum," one of the guards reported. "They say they're friends of the Luna." Ronan looked at Lyra, who nodded quickly. "They're the slaves I warned when I helped Ronan escape. Let them through." Helena stumbled forward, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Lyra, thank the moon goddess. We ran like you said, scattered into the forest. Most were recaptured within days, but some of us made it to neutral territory. We've been trying to get here for 3 months. Blackwood Pack is preparing for war. They're gathering allies, building up forces. They mean to attack Frost Peak to punish you for freeing their prisoner, and to punish Ronan for humiliating them." Ronan's arm tightened around Lyra's waist, protective and possessive. "Let them come. We'll be ready. And Helena, you and your friends are welcome here. You're free wolves now under my protection. No one will ever enslave you again." The months that followed were tense as both packs prepared for inevitable conflict, but Ronan kept his promise about rescuing the slaves still trapped in Blackwood territory. He sent a special forces team, led by Kira and including Lyra, who insisted on going despite Ronan's protests, to infiltrate the mines and free as many captives as possible. The rescue mission was dangerous and chaotic, but Lyra's knowledge of the mine layout made the difference, and her ability to handle silver chains meant they could free slaves faster than anticipated. They brought out 39 wolves that night, leading them to freedom while Blackwood forces scrambled to respond. The war came eventually, brutal and bloody and necessary. But Frost Peak fought with the righteousness of wolves defending the innocent, and slowly other packs joined their cause, disgusted by Blackwood's slave trade. When the dust finally settled, Blackwood's alpha was dead, his pack scattered and disbanded, and his territory divided among the packs that had fought to free it. Epilogue. Years later, when former slaves came to Lunalira seeking guidance or hope, she'd smile and tell them her story. About cutting silver chains from a dying wolf who turned out to be a king. About choosing freedom over safety. About running toward a future she couldn't predict. About learning to trust after years of abuse. About accepting love without surrendering autonomy. I was property for 8 years, she'd tell them, taking their hands in hers. I thought I'd never be free, never be more than a tool to be used and discarded. But the moon goddess had other plans. She gave me a gift I'd been taught to hide, and a chance to use it for something good. She led me to a king who saw me as a person before seeing me as a mate. She taught me that the right partner doesn't take your freedom. They fight to protect it. She'd introduced them to Ronan, still tall and powerful, still looking at her with the same love and respect he'd shown from the beginning. He could have commanded my obedience, she'd explain. As Alpha King, he had the right to claim me as property under old pack laws. But he chose partnership instead. Chose to court me and wait for my consent. Chose to respect my autonomy even when it would have been easier to just take what he wanted. That's how you know you found the right person. They make you stronger, not weaker. They free you rather than trapping you. And those former slaves would leave her presence standing taller, believing more firmly that they deserved respect and partnership and love. That their past didn't define their future. That somewhere out there might be a king kneeling in chains, waiting for them to set him free. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. This week I'm giving away 1 month of free access to all my Patreon content, exclusive stories, bonus chapters, and a special one linked to this episode. Just leave a comment below with your favorite quote from today's story, and I'll announce the winner in my next video. Good luck.